These are my 2025 GCSE results from when I finished year 11 exactly a year ago. And since finishing year 11 in UK school, I've dropped out, I've traveled Europe, I've met up with a load of my online friends. I made a self-improvement documentary with the BBC, which is like UK national TV. And very recently as well, I've done my first $20,000 cash collected month with my online coaching business and with my YouTube. And I have gone from probably where you are right now, where your parents want you to go down the traditional path of going to college or uni, and you don't really want to do that. It's kind of a bit of a dead end, and you want to go down the path of doing online business on maybe even like playing a sport professionally or just traveling and being free and not going down that dead end trap that it is. And I was in your position. And I've gone from being where you are, where my parents are like dead set on, me not dropping out and, continuing down the normal path and then going to college and university and sixth form and, A levels and shit like that, to where I am now. And there is like nobody online speaking about this. All the online business gurus are all about, the tactics so you can scam people and get money quick and, how to buy the Lamborghini and all this shit. And then there's also people which will tell you how to travel for cheap, and stuff like that. But there's nobody who tells you how to actually deal with your parents and convince your parents to do it. Because, if you're under 18, you legally aren't able to do it. If you are over 18, you legally are able to go down your own path and do what you want to do because you're an adult. But like, even with that, it's like you still can't really do that because you probably depend on your parents and you live with your parents, and so it's like you can't really go against their word, and there is nobody giving advice on it. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to walk you through my best, most authentic, most raw advice on how to actually deal with your parents if they want you to go to university or college down the traditional path and get a normal job and you don't. And also, with the points I'm about to make, I think it'll really, really surprise you how possible it actually is for you to convince your parents to allow you to drop out, even if you're not making any money online or doing anything like that at the moment. So, the first point I want to make is that beliefs are everything. And this goes for both you and for your parents. And what I mean by that is, as you, as a human being, goes through life, your brain is almost like a processor, okay? It's like a system. It gets inputs in, which are your senses and your experiences and your thoughts, and it processes them, and then it outputs your actions. But it's not just like input, thinking, action. There's also like the feedback which comes from the output, and you'll understand what I mean when I explain this. So let's say you're like a newborn baby or some shit like that, okay? And you don't have any beliefs or anything like that. You're like a newborn baby, and let's say as a newborn baby, you have your senses and shit, and you put your hand on like a hot stove, and the hot stove, you can see it's a stove, but you're a baby, you don't have any beliefs or knowledge, and so you don't really know shit. And so you put your hand on the hot stove, ow, it burns. That's pain. Okay, so you've got the input of like the senses. Oh, there's a stove there. You've brain's processed it. You've done the output of putting your hand on the stove, but then you've got the feedback of the stove being hot, which then feeds back around into the input of telling you to basically take your hand off the stove. Do you understand that? And so that's sort of an example of like, you learn that a stove is hot, and so then naturally you don't put your hand on a hot stove again. That's kind of how beliefs form, okay? And it's obviously not just like that when you're a baby. And this goes for everything. And so for you, for example, let's say you have the input of like, you don't want to go to university, but your parents want you to go to university. So your brain does some processing and you think, okay, I'm going to tell my parents that I want to drop out. All right. You tell your parents you want to drop out. You tell your parents you don't really like school and you want to do like less classes or some shit like that. You don't want to focus on it. You want to focus on your online business and your YouTube and everything. And you tell them that, and then maybe they have a negative reaction. That negative reaction is like equivalent to the baby putting its hand on the hot stove. And so you feel pain at that, and so that's feedback, and then it feeds back round into the inputs, and now you're not gonna tell them that again because they, got angry at you for saying that or something like that. That's kind of how a belief forms, okay? Where you tell your that's basically, as human beings, like the way our brains work is we experience reality and our brains form beliefs as a result of that reality, as a result of those experiences, assuming that what we experience will continue happening as it has done. Okay, and then basically what I'm getting at here is that your beliefs form around your day-to-day life assuming that that day-to-day life is going to continue in the routine it's in. And so it's like you kind of like, you know how in natural selection animals adapt to their environment. It's the same thing with your beliefs adapt to your, you know, your experiences. And so what I'm getting at here is your beliefs is almost like a shell in a way. It's you know, like a protective shell, where it adapts to your experiences in your day-to-day life. And it forms this like protective shell, which is like, you know, your beliefs work really, really well for your day-to-day life because they've adapted to that. But when it comes time to move into a new environment and do something new and scary, you're not adapted to that. And so it's quite hard to do it because your beliefs aren't adapted for that yet. Which is, you know, and that's kind of like a long-winded, deep explanation, but I like to explain things down at the basic level. I know, this is getting deep, isn't it? Because once you understand that, you kind of realize, well, that's why, you know, that's why people generally don't like unfamiliar things. People, and you know, this isn't always true, but in general, people prefer familiarity. You know, when if you were to go and do something new and scary, well, it'd be new and scary. Like, let's say we just, you know, went and dropped you off in fucking Khartoum, like the fucking, you know, capital of Sudan, and you'd be like, so unfamiliar. You know, it's so scary, new environment, you know, you wouldn't be used to it, it'd be scary. But then you take a Sudanese guy who's already, you know, grown up in Khartoum, his beliefs and his mind and everything is formed around that environment in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, and so it's like he'll be chill there. Do you get what I'm saying with that? And so essentially, from your experiences, your beliefs form from that. Okay, and this applies to both you and your parents here. And so, which one do I explain first? Do I explain parents or you first? I'll explain the parents first. All right. So, your parents, when they grow up, okay, for them, basically being a lawyer or a doctor and going to university is like a really great thing, and that's, you know, that's genuinely how you get rich. You know, that's genuinely like, and you probably already know this, like that was back then, that was like genuinely the methodology for it. You know, nowadays, you know, as you're enlightened to, it's obviously doing online business, but for them it was genuinely getting a degree, and you know, it was generally going to university and all that shit. Sorry, I'm just getting a notification. And so for them, their beliefs form around that's the best way to go because that was genuinely it. But naturally, as markets change and everything, what obviously happened is because degrees and everything and getting a normal traditional career going to university was this like, it was everybody's goal because that's what worked. What happened is everybody went and did that, and then because everybody goes and does it, everybody now has degrees, and because everyone has them, they're a commodity due to supply and demand. They're no longer this like valuable thing, you know, because everybody's got them, and that's why the job market today is kind of fucked, and why you probably don't want to go to university. Now, the same thing, you know, now in the modern day, like online business is that equivalent of what what university was for them. But like I said, people's beliefs, they don't update like that. Like, obviously, you know, your beliefs will, at least for this doesn't have to be a thing, but in general, people's beliefs do form very, very heavily, and more so, obviously, when they're younger, which you probably already know. And so for your parents, when they were brought up, their beliefs formed around that, you know, university and shit being the best way to go. And then they now take that into today when that's not really the truth, okay? And so coming back to the point of like beliefs are everything, that's what your parents believe. Now, beliefs are very, very hard to change, okay? They're very, very, very hard to change. Beliefs, the only way to change them is by doing inputs, but, you know, giving new inputs and shit. But the thing with beliefs is like, it's not just like a belief forms and then that belief is formed and then another one forms. Beliefs, like, they almost like fucking grow, and like they thicken and they get stronger. Because all your life, if you've lived your entire life thinking the education system is the best way to go, then being told that's not the case, well, it's going to be really hard to move away from that because you've been told again and again and again through repetition that that's not the case. You know, however old you are, all 17, 18, 19 years of your life, you have learned every single day, and you've had the repetition every single day that the sky is blue, okay? Now, let's say somebody told you that the sky is actually red. You wouldn't fucking believe them. You'd be like, no way, bro, I've just seen the sky is blue every single day, you know? And that's the same thing with your parents. They've been told every single day that the education system, university, is the best way to go. You're now telling them the sky is red. You're now telling them the university education system is not the way to go. They ain't gonna fucking believe you, and that's fine. That is fine, because obviously, you know, you've probably also heard this advice before. Your parents obviously only want the best for you, or I assume they do. Like, if you've got really, like, fucking fucked up parents, then I probably can't help you with that, because I've thankfully grown up without any crazy trauma, or, shit like that from having like crazy parents. If that is the case, unfortunately, I cannot help you with that. But assuming like, the majority of people, you don't have any crazy trauma, and your parents are like reasonable people, with that, you just need to understand that their beliefs are set. You're not really going to be able to change their beliefs that easily. And you sort of need to work around that a little to a decent degree. So that's sort of how, beliefs form and everything. That's very good to understand. Now, to explain how your beliefs work and everything, this is sort of disparate to what I was explaining with your parents, but for your beliefs, where this whole belief thing becomes relevant for you, is more so your belief on if you can succeed or not with online business. Because if you have tried to succeed with online business for years and years and years, and you've gone at it and you've gone at it and you fucking pummeled that shit, and it hasn't worked, well, it's like the repetition. I've seen the sky's blue every single day. Every single day you've seen online business doesn't work, or it's really hard to make it work. And so that forms a belief in your mind that online business is a really, really hard thing to make work. Whereas for me, for example, I've now experienced the online business is, I know it's not, but at least for me, for my personal self, I now believe that online business is easy for me because I've experienced it as easy for me through repetition, because it now is easy for me. You see what I'm getting at with this? And so essentially for you, if you, and it's not just like, oh, you have a belief and that's it. The beliefs basically loop back around and then cause you to act, and then those actions then cause more different outputs, which then those outputs cause different beliefs, and so it's like one big feedback loop in a way. And so essentially, if you are believing that online business is really hard to make it succeed, and you're believing that it's really hard to convince your parents to let you drop out and do online business or YouTube or whatever it is you may want to be doing, then basically as a result of that, you're going to believe that, and then that beliefs are going to influence your actions. And if you believe and think it's really, really hard, you're going to, think it's less likely to be able to succeed. And then as a result of that, you're going to basically act in less accordance to success. However, the one antidote to beliefs, the one very powerful thing to be able to change beliefs, okay? So, I'm not going to tell you it yet, because I'm gonna explain what you might think it is. So, if I was to ask you, what do you think you need to do to be able to change your own beliefs, or, in particular, change your parents' beliefs? Now, some people might think, oh, I need to have some like logical argument for it. I need to, show them the statistics of online business versus the education systems. I need to, it's a logical argument, this cogent logical argument, which makes sense, and that's what's going to convince them. Now, if you know anything about sales, or at least B2C, like business to consumer sales, which you probably don't if you're watching this video, but basically, people, unless you're working with like an entrepreneur or like a highly logical, self-made person who's already successful, they're going to be emotional, okay? They aren't going to operate from very much logic at all. They're going to operate out of emotion, and mostly emotion. They're going to be controlled mostly through emotion. Sometimes I go on sales calls with people, and selling coaching and shit, and it's like we have the perfect logical argument. They've got the whole risk reversal, the whole guarantee. There's literally 0% or like 0.1% chance of them failing or something like that, and it's like 99.9% chance of them succeeding. Because it's like everybody else who joins our stuff succeeds, and it's like we've got some crazy guarantees, and so it's like, it's like they're fully logically convinced, and then they're still like, no, I don't want to buy because I need to think about it. It doesn't feel right. It's scary, and it's like people will hold back on making a logical decision just because of their feelings, and that's how most people operate, and that's fine. That's how humans are. You generally will succeed more if you can operate out of logic, but we're not going to talk about that today. Essentially, the antidote to beliefs and the thing that you can use to influence beliefs is emotion, okay? Now, for you, for example, okay, if you want to influence your beliefs and you want to change your beliefs and everything, a good way of doing that is by having very, very lucid and very, I don't know, how would you describe a strong emotion? What adjective would you use to describe a strong emotion? Very powerful emotions, I know there's probably a better adjective I can use, but my lexicon isn't really the best at the moment. So you can, induce very powerful emotions within yourself, and then that, changes your beliefs, and then you succeed. And one of the ways to induce very powerful emotions within yourself is basically inducing the emotion of fear and anxiety, because in general, this is a whole other point, but fear and anxiety will basically is much more powerful than good emotions of desire. And you know, in the lens of getting you to take action, emotions of fear and anxiety and pain are much stronger and much more motivating than emotions of potential gain and potential desire. And I'm not going to explain why that's the case. There's a whole biological argument for that, which I've explained in other videos. But essentially, that just is the case. Pain motivates you more than gain, okay? And so, or pain avoidance in particular. And so, if you were to induce the emotions of fear and anxiety within yourself, that would get you to lock the fuck in. A good way to induce that emotion would be investing in mentorship, because then you spend a ton of money, you're now down a ton of money, you're like, shit, I need to take action to be able to succeed. You know, and then it's like you don't want to waste your money, and so you take action, and that happens a lot of people I see. And so that's sort of inducing emotions within yourself. And that's sort of an example there. Now with your parents, inducing emotions into your parents is actually... It's somewhat easy, and I've done this, and this is actually quite a tangible tactic. I know this video has been very intangible, but this is quite a tangible tactic you can use. And that is essentially just to make them very, very abundantly aware, and very, very like, yeah, just abundant. That's a good word. I'm thinking too much about the words I'm saying. You know, you make them very abundantly aware, make it always obvious at all times that you don't want to go down the education system, that route. You hate that. It's a waste of, you feel it's a waste of time for you. You feel like you're wasting your youth, your most valuable years of your life on going down some path that you don't want to go down only because they want you to go down it. You sort of need to make that aware for them. And it's not just like telling them, but it's also with your actions. So I think the best way I can illustrate this is by telling you the story of me dropping out. So to be fair, I was already making like a little bit of money from my business and shit. But my parents did not want me to drop out or anything, bro. Like they were like hard dead set on like, you know, you got to go to college, you got to go do A levels and shit. And I just didn't want to do that at all whatsoever. And so I didn't even do this on purpose. It's just naturally manifested. School for me was just almost like a seven hour like void period within my day of my life every single day. And what I would do, like every single morning, I'd wake up early in the morning to get work done, and I would, you know, 4:30 in the morning, I'd start my work on my business. And then I'd have to leave for school. I'd start getting ready for school at like 8:20, because I could do it really fast and like sprint my bike to school in like 10 minutes or whatever it is. And I would essentially just like leave it to the very, very last minute. And what would happen is I would like forget to set my alarm or some stuff to stop working, and I'd continue working, and then I'd be like 20 minutes late to school because I just like worked for an extra 20 minutes. And that ended up happening like loads, like every single day. And my parents were like, Samuel, you got to stop being late. You know, the school didn't actually care that much, but they were like, Samuel, you got to stop. My family calls me Samuel. You got to stop being late. And I couldn't. Like my dad threatened to take away my computer so I couldn't work on my business anymore. And I tried to stop myself being late, but I couldn't stop myself because I would just enjoy the work too much in the morning to be able to do that. You know, they knew that I had no friends in school whatsoever. They knew the other kids at school tried to take the piss out of me from, you know, doing business and doing YouTube and everything like that. They knew about all that. They knew about how I just sort of, you know, just detested school, and that I really didn't want to do that. And that they knew how much I love my work and making my videos and doing my business. And I made that very, very clear to them, not only through my words and telling them, and it's not just like, oh, you know, because if you were to try and tell your parents, like, you know, you'd probably say it in like a very unconfident way, you know, like you'd feel like it's almost like cringy. I would make sure to tell them in a confident way, and I would tell them often, you know, and I would just make it like a normal thing where it was almost like I wouldn't hide the fact that I really didn't want to go to school, and I wouldn't hide the fact that I was like, you know, doing everything I could to convince them. I was honest and open about that I was trying to convince them. You know, and my mum would ask me, oh, you know, how was your day at school today? And I was like, oh, you know, just, you know, another 7 hours waiting before I can work on my business again, you know, or something like that. And you know, just say, you know, just like casually say stuff like that. And then they'll be like, oh, you know, why were you late? I'd just be like, oh, you know, I was working, you know, and it's just like, you know, stuff like that. And so really, it's just I made them like abundantly aware, and it's not just through my words, it was also through my actions of being late and like never ever once doing homework, and you know, never ever going to detentions. Or I mean, in my school there was like a loophole you could do to get out of detention, which was because like when you're in year 11 you were supposed to be like studying and stuff, instead of going to detention. But you need to go to the detention room to like get your name written down there, and then from there you'd walk like by yourself over to the like study area for like the year 11s and everything. And when you're walking, you could just like you could just not go there and just like go down the stairs and leave, and I'd do that every time. And like just like I'd already been registered, so like no one ever found out, and that was the thing. But and it's like and they knew about that as well. I was honest about that. And like I was just like kind of proud of it in a way, finding this loophole so I could save like an hour of my day every now and then. And I just made them abundantly aware until eventually I got somewhat lucky. Like the school I was supposed to go through to for sixth form, they like fumbled my application, and so basically they just like completely forgot I existed, and they just like I got decent GCSE results, and so they I didn't study at all, by the way. I don't know how I didn't pay attention in class. I was always just on my phone in class. I don't know how I got decent GCSE results, but you can see them here again if you really want to see them. You're probably gonna click back on the video or something like that. They're right there. But yeah, it's I don't know how I did, but yeah, the sixth form that I was supposed to go to, they like fumbled my application and shit. And so then it was either like I either drop out or I go to some like community college or I continue going to the same school I was at, but like I just had like absolutely no friends there or anything like that. So it was like kind of a dead, all or nothing situation in a way. And even then I still had a plan for because at that school that I was going to go to for sixth form, which is like the final 2 years of your school after you finish year 11 in the UK. It's like what you got to do on like GCSE results day is like you've got to physically go to the school that you're gonna go to for sixth form with your GCSE results. It's such a weird system. And basically that school, like between my current school, the school I was at, and the new school was like these woods, and I'd be on my bike. So I was just planning on like going, they're pretty big woods, just like basically turning the tracker off of my phone and just hiding in these woods for the day to kind of like forcefully fumble my, my application and shit. But that didn't end up happening. They just like fumbled it for me. So, essentially with that, like, my parents were kind of aware it was either, I either drop out or I, go to some community college or some other like shitty sixth form. And I remember I had a few conversations with my dad, and he would like go back and forth. Like one time we'd finish the conversation being like, yeah, you're going to drop out. And other times he was like, no, like we can't do that. And there was a couple conversations where he was sort of like, going up and down like that. But I knew with full certainty that as soon as he mentioned once that, okay, maybe you don't. I was like, by that point I was like fully certain that I wasn't going to go, because I was just sort of like, flat out refused in a way. And I was willing to go to that lengths. And again, this comes back to your beliefs and shit, bro. Oh yeah, no, by the way, the point I wanted to make there is if you are like that persistent with it and that consistent with it, and you are like clear and you are not hesitant at all, and you make your parents very, very aware that you don't want to do that and that you hate it, then as parents they're gonna feel about that because they care for you, and they're gonna feel that emotion that they're gonna feel the emotion that you hate the system and you love going down this new path. And that combined with a bit of a logical argument for it, where you're persistent, it's mostly just a persistence. Hopefully, if your parents are emotionally intelligent people, they will kind of realize that they will be putting you through a lot of pain by forcing you down the system. And if you just make that aware to them, then hopefully that's enough emotion to basically change their beliefs on it. But for you to be able to take action like that, though, to be persistent, to then change their emotion, to change their beliefs, you need to have beliefs yourself, okay? You essentially need to have beliefs yourself that you can actually succeed, because you're not going to be able to be persistent and confident that you want to drop out and that you're going to succeed with online business if you're not actually confident. If you are hesitant, then it's not really going to work. And so, essentially, you need to change your own beliefs that you can succeed. And like I said, doing that, like investing in mentorship is one great way. Making sacrifices, like telling all your fucking, maybe your gaming friends or shitty friends you got in school or some shit, like just telling them that you're going to lock in on an online business and that you're not, not going to spend time with them anymore. Just doing stuff like that that can really, really help you to be able to do that. I've got a whole other video on changing your beliefs and everything. I'm not going to speak about it a ton here. But just understand that you need to be confident to be able to be persistent, to be able to change your parents' beliefs, if that makes sense. And you need to basically be willing to make sacrifices and do what it takes. Because if you're not, then their beliefs are just going to be imposed onto you, which they kind of already are. But anyway, that's the first point. Beliefs are everything. The second point is the risk to reward continuum. And this isn't really particularly to do with your parents, in all honesty. This is more so for you to understand like the difference between online business and the education system. Because right now, let me just open up a window, it's getting really hot. Right now you're in the education system, and getting a normal job through that is very, very low risk and also very, very low reward. You probably understand that. You know, a normal job is low risk, low reward. You just basically sell your time in a way, you know? Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, there's entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is very high risk. You know, you can go broke, you can lose everything, but because of that, it's also very high reward. Now, it's not just like binary, it's you're a 9 to 5 slave or you're an entrepreneur. That you can be in between, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum, okay? Because you can be like in the middle of this spectrum. For example, you could be a sales rep, you could be a setter, you could be a freelancer, you know, you could be a video editor, someone like that in the middle, or like a sports player, I guess, where it's not as high risk as being an entrepreneur, where you can lose everything and like, you know, go completely broke and shit. But it's also not really low risk like a job. It's sort of in between. It's still performance based. And because it's partially performance based, but you still got a lot of security, like for example, being a sales rep or someone like that, like, you know, high ticket closer, it's got like middle risk where it's still based, you know, it's still risky for you, but then if you have a bad month, you're still going to make some money and you're not going to, you know, leak money or anything like that if you have a bad month. But at the same time, you can't go and make 100K per month being a high ticket closer. You know, that's not, I guess if you're like a sales manager, but like even then it's like, you know, you're increasing risk for reward there. So essentially like what the point I'm making for you here is you need to decide where on this spectrum you want to be. You probably know you don't want to be all the way over here where it's low risk, low reward, 9 to 5 wage slave. But, you know, are you sure you really want to be the entrepreneur? Because I can tell you with certainty, bro, like being an entrepreneur is really fucking hard. Like everything is always on you. The responsibility is always on you no matter what. And it's like, it's just like, the more freedom you have, the more chance there is for shit to go wrong. You know, the less guardrails you have in place, sure, the more freedom you have, but also the more, you know, potential there is to fucking step on a mine and blow yourself up. And so essentially what I'm getting at here is basically you want to decide like how much risk you want to take and how much reward you actually want to pursue. Because if you don't really care about changing the world and having some huge mission, like long term, I want to, you know, I'm going to talk about this more, but I want to reform the education system. And that's my mission. And so for that, I need to be an entrepreneur because I need the really high reward of being able to do that. And so I need, you know, I need the high risk. But for you, like if you just want to make 10K per month and you want to chill and you just want to live freedom and travel or, you know, just live a nice life and have a family, then like maybe you could go for middle risk, middle reward. You could be a setter, you could be a high ticket closer, you could be a video editor. You know, you could do something more aligned with that where there's less risk and there's less reward. I mean, regardless of what you do though, you're still going to need to go through pain and anxiety and hardship. That's just, even if you go down the normal system, you're still going to have to go through that. And so there's no like easy way to success. There really isn't. But just understand on this spectrum, like it's not like you have to be an entrepreneur because that's what the YouTubers told you to be. Or you don't have to be like a, you know, YouTuber with really high risk. You really can like sort of be in the middle and you can go down to something which is less risk but also less reward, but still more risk and more reward than being a 9 to 5 wage slave. So that's my second point there. Now my third point, this is my final point, and that's that the education system right now is pretty fucked. I can speak on this point all day, man. I can speak on it so much, but I'm going to try and keep my point here a decent bit concise. And this isn't particularly about your parents now. This is more so just making you aware of these ideas and increasing your awareness. In the UK, the education system is fucked at multiple levels. It's fucked at the sense that it's completely underfunded, and you know, it's like just being in a school, you can just see that it's like messed up. Like there were times when I was in school that they wouldn't be able to afford like new like books, you know, the books you write in and everything to do your work. They won't be able to afford new books until like the government paid them again or something like that. And so we're literally having to be like getting like random pieces of scrap paper to use and like stick in the back of our current books and shit like that because like, you know, they couldn't afford it, and stuff like that. And it's like it was like the education system's so underfunded, and that's like, you know, that's a decently easy thing to fix. You know, teachers are underpaid. There's a whole other thing about teachers which I'm not going to go into. But essentially, it's at least in the UK. I don't know about the US and other countries, but at least in the UK, it's fucked up that level. But then I think in the West as a whole, I can't speak about like, you know, other countries and shit, but at least in the West as a whole, I believe the education system is messed up on a foundational level as well, on, you know, like a very basic level or like low down fundamental level, just for the values it's based on. Because it's like we are like a capitalist society, you know, and obviously, you know, like if you know about like capitalism versus socialism versus like communism and stuff. Socialism, by the way, socialism is like in between capitalism and communism, but basically, like the more communist you are, the more like less risk, less reward there is because everybody gets paid the same. It's fully equal. So there's like low risk for everybody, but there's also low reward. Whereas capitalism is on the other side of that, where it's entrepreneurship, you know, capitalism, high risk, high reward. And we're on, I mean, it's again, it's all a spectrum. There's no like one best point. You know, the US is more capitalist than the UK, and the UK is more capitalist than China. And it's, you know, it's quite a spectrum, but for where we are on this spectrum right now, by the way, like I said, there's no like one good point on the spectrum. It depends on time and circumstance and everything, you know. Sorry, a plane's just going overhead. But the point I'm making here is our education systems, they are very much more so aligned to more socialism and more like collectivism where everybody's equal and there's like low risk and low reward. The education systems are more towards that angle than how our societies really are. If you understand that, there's like a disparity between them. Okay, or disparity. No, yeah, disparity. That's the word, not discretion. Discretion is like, I don't know what discretion means, but essentially, like what happens is in school you're taught that you need to,
It's 15 hours.
fuck off. You need to essentially follow the set path. You need to get a degree, you need to go down this. And if you've got like, you know, a good skill of being good at football or you're good at singing or, you know, something like that where it's not within that traditional path and it's more of like a high risk but high reward thing, like trying to be a footballer or a singer, you're taught that like that's like a cool thing. You know, it's nice that you do that. It's a nice hobby. It's a fun hobby. It's a healthy hobby. However, that's not going to work out. And you need to go down, you need to take less risk and you need to have less reward as a result of that. And that's kind of how the education system teaches us. Whereas in society, the way our society is actually built up, like where it currently is that it's more towards the capitalism side of things, the more individualism, the more, you know, high risk, high reward side of things. Whereas a school is very much more like, you know, I don't want to say like schools are fucking communist because that's, you know, that sounds like a fucking like, you know, conspiracy theory or some shit. But they are more aligned towards that direction. You know, of like, oh, you know, the world is, you know, it's equal and you need to, you know, because the world isn't equal, the world isn't fair and shit like that. And the school that teaches it that way. And for example, like one thing that I really disagree with in schools and shit is, you know, the degrees, you know, people getting degrees and like ranking, you know, because what degrees are, like what grades are, is basically ranking students between themselves. Like a grade 9, you know, on its own means nothing. A grade 9 is only good, okay, because it's better than all the other grades. And all the other grades are given to all the other people, and you need to be not the top 5 or 2% or 5% or whatever it is to get a grade 9. Grades and shit are just ranking systems for humans, for, you know, for people. Okay. And that's like a very like, you know, capitalist, individualist thing. It's a very like brutal, high risk, high reward thing, you know? However, the education system makes it less individual and makes it more collective and makes it less like capitalist and high risk, high reward, and makes it look more low risk, low reward by looking at the kids who have like dyslexia and looking at the kids who have like, you know, other like mental disabilities or stuff like that. And instead of like, you know, equally ranking everybody and including their, you know, disability within that grade, okay, and when I say include it within the grade, it's like give them, you know, the authentic grade that they would normally get if everyone was ranked equally. Instead of doing that, they artificially inflate those people's grades by giving them more time, by giving them more, you know, giving them more resources and stuff in the exam, essentially making the exam unfair to reward the people who are naturally at a disadvantage, okay? And I'm not saying these people are inherently worse people. They might just be, you know, worse at that subject because they've got like dyslexia or some shit like that. And, you know, fair enough, it's like there's nothing against them. However, essentially by giving them better grades by giving them more time, it's not like you're just making them better and everyone else is the same. To be able to make those people better, you have to make the people at the top worse, okay? And that's kind of what like communism does in a way, and socialism does, because if everyone's getting paid equally, you're taking the best people and taking their extra reward and giving it to the people who do worse, and it's, like at the end of the day, there's not like it's not like there's one good point on this spectrum of like communism versus capitalism and shit and all this. I think it depends because, for example, in wartime, you might want to be more towards like socialism and shit, and have less risk in the economy and all that stuff, and like control your people more during wartime because like you're prioritizing those short term more. Whereas when you're in peacetime and shit, like kind of how we are now to a degree, you'd maybe want to be more in the capitalist sense where you take more risk, more reward, with the economy and everything. The point I'm making here is the education system raises us to be more aligned to the socialism type of stuff by taking, essentially by rewarding hard work less and by rewarding, people's individual talents less and forcing everybody down the same route, saying, it's like equality is one thing, as in like giving people same opportunities and not being prejudiced, like that is one thing. Sameness is another thing, okay? And I think this is where a lot of people get mixed up. Equality and sameness are not the same thing, okay? And the example I can give, this is like man and woman, okay? It's like men and women, we are equal in value, okay? And you might disagree with that, but we are equal in value because we need one another to survive. Okay, and so if you're just looking at a survival sense, we're equal in value because we need one another. If you believe that like men do like all the work and women are just there to like make babies, even if you believe that, then you still have to agree that we are equal in value at just a survival level because we need one another. Okay. However, despite being equal there, we're not the same. And that's probably very, very abundantly clear to you. However, what I think the education does, and the education even does this with like boys and girls in school, it's like they force them down the exact same path despite us not being the same. They get, given us, equal opportunities, fair enough, not being prejudiced, fair enough, okay? But then they get that confused with sameness and they force everyone down the same route. And so that, the girl who's, naturally going to be more emotional and maybe authentically, okay, I'm not saying all girls are like this, but maybe authentically she'd prefer to be like a housewife and just raise children, and maybe that's what she authentically wants to do. She's put it, in the same funnel as all the boys who want to become, entrepreneurs or football players and stuff like that. And it's like they kind of find this like this weird ass middle point where everyone's going down the same path despite everyone not being the same. And it's like it's one same path for everybody, one shoe size for everybody who's completely different feet sizes, It's not like a one shoe fits all approach because people are so different. We can be equal, fair enough, but we are not the same. We are not the same. And I think we can go to a whole nother argument with the political situation of the UK, which I'm not going to go into, and ethnicities and stuff like that, which I'm not going into. But essentially, with that, it's like, again, I'll go into that a little bit. You can believe all races are equal, okay. But that doesn't mean you have to believe all races are the same. And I think what we get confused with now in the West is that assuming that all races are equal and getting that confused by assuming all races are also the same, which we're not. You can treat us equally, but you don't have to treat us as same, if that makes sense. And I think that's like a fundamental flaw in belief in society right now, confusing equality with sameness. And I think the fundamental flaw with the education system is basically treating, basically being more collectivist and being more, sameness and being more, more aligned towards socialism and rewarding people who don't work hard by, giving them safety nets and stuff and low risk compared to how society actually is right now, which is obviously, a lot more high risk, high reward when you're actually out in there in the world. Because this is the thing, like, if you try and artificially force society to be more, socialist or communist than it wants to be, then capitalism will naturally emerge, and competitivism will naturally emerge, and you can see this in the job market in a way, wherein it's like they try to make everybody equal in a way by giving everybody degrees and all that and giving everybody equal opportunity. And they're like, oh, it's no longer competitive. We make it equal. We help the people who do worse. But then what happens is in the job market, the employers see that everybody's got degrees and then they stop, hiring people based upon degrees. And they hire people based upon other qualities. And so that's how you get to the point where you can have a fucking PhD and not be able to get hired. Maybe not a PhD, I don't know about that, but you can have like a high level degree and still not get hired, because degrees don't mean anything nowadays because they're so easy to get. Well, not necessarily, but everyone has them. And so it's like the competitiveness is no longer in getting the degree. The competitiveness moves to getting a job after getting the degree. You cannot get rid of the competitiveness if that's the nature of the society that you're sort of trying to take the competitiveness away. If you try and like smudge it in one place, it'll emerge in another. And so essentially, that's sort of what I think the education system's got wrong with it at a fundamental level. And I'm still learning more about this. I'm kind of explaining this now because I want to be able to articulate it in a good way and explain it in a good way. But that's kind of like my beliefs with it, and we can be open for debate with all this stuff. But that's sort of like what I've come to understand at the moment. But other than that, man, that's my main points. Now, if you are actually a self-improvement creator or a coach, or you even want to start doing like self-improvement related videos where you can make money online by helping people, and you want to do that so you can make your first 2K per month so that you can quit school, drop out, so you don't have to go down the normal system, so you can travel freely, and then I can change your life and I can really, really help you with that. I don't think I've really introduced myself. My name's Sam Walford. I'm a 17-year-old dropout entrepreneur from the UK, and I help self-improvement creators, maybe just like you, to make their first 2K per month online. Actually, very soon. It's only in like about a month actually. Me and a load of my clients, who are young guys exactly like you, now making money online with like self-improvement content. Which is, I don't know. I was going to go on a different point there. Anyway, I'll continue what I was saying. We're all now like dropping out, and a load of us are moving in together in this house in this penthouse in Albania, which is good for like a month, which is going to be really, really, really sick. And what I was going to say there is that we're almost forming our own education system in a way, which is basically like my program, which I help people with. And don't worry, I'm not selling you any shit like here. I'm not trying to fucking get you to just like buy through a sales page or anything like that. But because we also work like parent results with a full money back guarantee. And so if you are potentially interested in getting help from us and you like my ideas and you want to learn more from me, there is a link linked below where you can basically book in a call with my partner, Evan, and you can discuss potentially working with us, and we'll give you some free value on that call anyway and put you in the right direction anyway. Absolutely no pressure if you're not interested. There's also a video that explains more about what we do and everything down there, if you just want to check that video out. That'll probably be the second link. The top link in the description is $1,000 Protocol, my free community, my free course. Which you can get for completely free. It does require email and phone number sign up. And if you don't want to join that, again, I completely understand. But regardless of you clicking on my links or any shit like that, man, I hope you have an amazing day. I'd also appreciate if you could click subscribe so you see more videos like mine. But yeah, have an amazing day, bro. Bye-bye.